I think some people may know what workplace violence is. Maybe they're not quite sure how workplace violence is defined. Maybe we could start right off with, sort of what you found to be the quote, the sort of definition of what workplace violence is, and maybe some of the different types that there are.
Mhm. A lot of people use the OSHA definition, which I'll just read it. It's any act of threat or physical violence, harassment, intimidation, or other threatening, disruptive behavior that occurs in the workplace. And so this can range from just threats and verbal abuse to actual homicide or physical assault. But the main point is that it's an intentional act. Whether it was planned or it was more spur of the moment, it's an intentional act which has the likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm as well. A lot of people forget about that one. And, also just deprivation of, your basic human rights. And suicide is also in there as well, which a lot of people feel that they'll miss that a lot of times. They don't see that as workplace violence. But I've worked with places where an employee or someone who knows someone within that organization goes in and commits suicide within the building, and then that causes a lot of psychological harm and other things as well. And so you just basically have to have an individual who wants to do some sort of harm in a workplace for workplace violence to actually occur.
Do you see a lot of times that workplace violence the people that are involved, it's because of the pressure of their jobs and basically leadership lacking in management at times that leads to workplace violence?
There's so many different factors, but yes, that those all are in there. There's a lot of high stress workplaces right now. And as, stress builds up and builds up, if the person doesn't have an outlet for that, say they're going to their boss and saying, hey, I need more work-life balance with my family. I need someone to help me out with these projects. I'm drowning over here. And if they keep trying and nothing's happening, that stress just keeps piling up because more than likely they're having issues at work. And then it's also affecting home life, their health. And so those stressors start adding up. And also, there's a lot of lack of appropriate training for supervisors just in how to handle certain things. So if supervisors had the proper training, that a lot of times helps as well to sort of know how to handle these employees. So it can also decrease some of their stress. But actually, it's about 75% of employees also say they're dealing with workplace bullying. So that's become a big one recently.
I was going to ask you about that. Is the bullying, is that classified also as some workplace violence? Because sure, it could be, adults can be bullied just like kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's those ambiguous, toxic sort of behaviors, such as, just ethical violations that keep happening in the workplace and no one's doing anything about it, to the bullying, to sexual harassment, to comments that are being made. And so all of this goes into essentially creating a toxic workplace. And you'll hear a lot of employees say, well, I reported it, or my manager was just moved to another division after, he or she was causing all these issues. And I know a lot of people say in the government, it's kind of, promote them out. So those people who are causing issues or can't get along with coworkers or supervisors are then promoted to a new job, to a different division, and they just keep passing the problems around until it finally comes to a head at some point in time.
Different types of workplace violence, I guess, sort of, they fall into so many different categories. It's kind of hard to say, well, there's the 3 types of workplace violence, right? It's it's a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, there's 4 basically main ones that people try to categorize a lot of it into, and a lot of them do fall within there. So there's sort of the criminal intent, those who enter a workplace with the intention to rob or commit some sort of criminal act. And actually robberies are one of the leading causes of workplace violence. So if you have a retail store and there's a lot of people coming in and out, or you're just open to the public and whatnot, the criminal intent is actually pretty high in terms of workplace violence. And then you have the violence directed at employees by like clients, customers, those who are coming
Exactly.
in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it just one bad day, as Pete talked about, at work, and then you get home and then it builds up, or it's a specific grudge. It could be from a coworker. It could be a specifically stressful situation. And if other people in the workplace do not identify these problems before they get big, then we could have an active shooter. We could have a specific and huge thing happen, or a viral video that really doesn't help the company and it could cause a lot of damage as well, and lives.
So that's two. What else we have?
Then you have the violence where it's an employee creating violence on or perpetrating violence on either another coworker, supervisor, or manager. And then the last one is just the typical one that people understand is domestic violence, those situations that spill over. So those people may not have a tie to the organization other than to someone who's inside there, and then they come in and violence occurs. So for example, there was one in the news where, a teacher was in a school and her husband, well, it was the ex-husband at that time, came in and did do some acts of violence and had a loaded gun and everything. And so that's sort of like the fourth type.
Interesting. Are there any, I guess, glaring warning signs, or maybe not so glaring, maybe some subtle warning signs that people should be educated to recognize? Maybe some tips that you could share that, some things to look out for.
I mean, there's no one size fits all. And in my field, once an act of violence happens and then all the reports come in, all the law enforcement comes in, and you really dig into these people's lives, you see that there were so many. And a lot of times it's just that, different departments or different people or different organizations aren't communicating all of these behaviors. And so whenever you get the report of what happened, it looks like people should have known right away. But a lot of times the stuff isn't brought to light until an incident occurs. And one of the ones I always like to tell people is, the person gets really happy. They may have been disgruntled, upset with people, upset with the workplace. And then all of a sudden they start coming in and they're really happy that week. And people think, oh, great, John has changed and he's in a great mood. We have nothing to worry about anymore. We don't have to tiptoe around what we say to him. But that might be because he has a plan now. He knows what day he or she is going to commit this act. And so that's a number one that I always tell people is, we often talk about the changes in behavior from your normal behavior to like disgruntlement or anger, but you also have to pay attention to the opposite. When they have been disgruntled so much and then all of a sudden they're happy.
I don't think I've heard of that before, because usually, like you said, it's usually the other way around, where you have somebody who, they're normal, they're doing a job, you say hi to them, whatever, and then all of a sudden they kind of maybe get withdrawn, they get quiet, maybe they're, a little bit more sullen and they change in that regard. But that's interesting, because I haven't heard that, the other way, they could go the other way too, and that could be equally as a warning sign that could be easily potentially recognized as something, as you said, because now they have a plan. Now they're like, I know what I'm going to do now. I'll show these people. So until Friday, and then that's the day, and that's really scary.
Mm-hmm. So that's one that most people miss. And that's always my favorite one.